Oh, there's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Well, hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with another tag. I have kind of resuscitated a tag that, I don't know when it went up, but maybe a year or so ago. And I was just kind of hunting around on BookTube for a tag that I might want to do, because I was in the mood for doing a tag. And I found this one. This is the Book Nostalgia tag, and it was originally created, I believe, last year by Noah of Everyone Who Reads It Must Converse. Noah's channel, Everyone Who Reads It Must Converse, is a channel that I just never got around to exploring until very recently, and I'm trying to make up for lost time. So I reached out to him on Instagram to seek his blessing for me to do this tag, and here I am. And I urge you all to go check out his channel. He is one of those brave souls. I think he's the only brave soul I know, except for one guy who keeps disappearing. Steve Partridge used to do this too. Live Friday reads. So Noah does a live Friday reads, and with the time zone difference, he's in Georgia, in the deep south. I'm in Japan. I'm almost never up. In fact, maybe never up to watch it live. But he has guests, and he answers questions and talks about it. It's quite a unique way to do a Friday reads, and I want to try it someday, but I have a little bit of stage fright. But I digress. I love this tag, and let me tell you my spin on it, which is, to me, this is like a storytelling tag. This is a chance for me to tell personal stories about books in my life. So that is nostalgia, right? That's kind of how I'm approaching it, and I have come up with a fabulous, inimitable mix of books that were childhood loves and more recent books, because I think nostalgia and, emotionally satisfying memories connected to books could be from something that happened 2 years ago. 2 weeks ago might be a bit of a stretch, but not impossible. I don't have any like that, but a mix of various times in my life and situations. So without further ado, let's get to the prompts. Number 1, the oldest book from your life that you still own. Now, I've restricted myself to books that I have here in Tokyo. I have a whole bunch of books in storage in Canada, and I could have thought long and hard about which one of those I might have owned the longest, but no, I'm going with a book that I have here in Tokyo that I have personally owned the longest, and I didn't do a thorough search of my library, but I did an emotional search, and I found one that I wanted to talk about, so here it is. A gay novel from the late 1980s, The Irreversible Decline of Eddie Socket by John Weir. When was this published? I lied. It's published, I think, 1991. And I apparently bought it and read it that year. And I love this novel. This is one of the first AIDS novels that I read, and it was one of the more successful ones. In my memory, I brought it all the way to Tokyo in a couple of years ago for the express purpose of rereading it. I have not yet reread it, but it has a special place in my memory as, like I say, being one of those first works of fiction that incorporated the AIDS narrative that was so central to gay male lives in 1991. And what I remember about this book is one scene where the narrator is thinking back to his adolescence when I think it was just a heavy petting or kissing session with a high school friend of the same gender in a truck. And I just remember there's the description of their down-filled jackets rustling noisily against each other as they're making out in the truck. And I've never forgotten it, and it touched me at the time, and I still carry that image and that auditory image. Is that auditory something in my heart? So, The Irreversible Decline of Eddie Socket. I'm worried that when I reread it, I'm not going to like it, but probably what I'll do is, if I get very far into it and it's not working for me, I'll just put it aside and just hang on to the memories I have of this novel. Now, this, I am so delighted that I did this tag, especially because of number 2. First loved library book. And I didn't choose the first one. I would go back to childhood stuff. And I could tell all kinds of stories about books I discovered at the library. But there's one that's been kind of niggling at me over the years, because I could never find it, even though I remember the title, but I must have been doing something wrong, because I found it right away when I was researching for this tag. And that is the very first full-length kind of adult book about nature. It's kind of a memoir that I read, and I wasn't very old. I was a precocious reader. I think I was maybe 12, 11 when I read this. Peg Leg Pete. The story of it's got a long subtitle. The story of a warm friendship between a wild mallard drake and the family of Mel Ellis. And Mel Ellis is the author, and it was written in 1973, and I borrowed that book from the library in the rinky-dink little town in Saskatchewan where I grew up. The library was about the size of this room, and, it was a provincial library. Some books circulated from library to library, and I picked this one up, and I was vaguely interested in nature. My childhood interest in nature was reading books and magazines about nature rather than being out in nature. It's a kind of a gay thing you might not understand, and I loved this book, and it was about, all these years later, my memory of it is very emotional, and it has to do with this man and his family adopted a wounded or an injured wild mallard drake, and he had a broken leg, and they kind of nursed him back to health. And I found it so compelling, and I've never forgotten it. But maybe the last time that I thought to check, the internet didn't have as much information as it does now, because I pulled it up right away just yesterday when I was researching the stag, and now I want to reread it. Has anybody else read Peg Leg Pete? Number 3. A book given to you. I have many emotion-laden, emotionally meaningful examples of stories that I could tell about books given to me, but the one that is the apex of my book gift receiving experience, and I have talked about this a few times before, is a gift from BookTube's own and my dear friend, Britta Bowler. I can't remember if it was for my birthday or what it was for, but she gave me the Barbara Pym cookbook by Honor Wyatt and Hilary Pym. Hilary Pym was Barbara Pym's sister, and she outlived Barbara Pym by maybe 10 years, 8 years. And so she and this other writer, Honor Wyatt, who was also a friend of, I think, both Hilary and Barbara's, compiled a cookbook of Barbara Pym's favorite recipes, and in fact, recipes for food that was referred to in Barbara Pym's novels. I actually already had a reprinted copy of this book, but this is the first edition. Look at this. The cover design is reminiscent of one particular edition of her novels, and so I was so excited to have it, and then I opened it. And if you could have heard me squeal, it is signed by Barbara Pym's sister, Hilary Pym. If there was a fire, and I could only grab one book from my library, it would be this. That's how much I treasure this book. I know quite a bit about Hilary Pym. I have read three biographies of Barbara Pym, and Hilary Pym is in every one. And I think it was it was Barbara Pym's debut novel, Sometime Gazelle, which was the first novel I read of hers, where she talks about cauliflower cheese. And I Googled the recipe. It wasn't online, and there was no reference to it being in Barbara Pym's novel, and started making it, and I still make it today. But there's all kinds of other recipes in here of Barbara Pym's. There's a very British one, Toad in the Hole. Number 4, a book recommended to you, and I have a lot to say about this because I'm so freaking weird. I don't like, how do I put this? I don't do well with book recommendations. When somebody recommends a book to me, and I don't think I'm alone in this, but it is a little bit strange, you have to admit, I'm uncomfortable, especially if it's a book they have read and loved, because I don't want to hurt their feelings, and I'm very fussy in particular about what I like. So if somebody specifically recommends a book to me, I am that much less likely to read it anytime soon. And that includes books that are gifts, I have to say. Because I don't want to, ruffle any feathers. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And so I have now a standard thing that I say when I give books as gifts. I say, or I write in the card or whatever, I love this book, but if you don't like it, don't worry about it. Don't be uncomfortable. Because I'm always uncomfortable about that, even with just a book recommendation. So, I have a emotionally meaningful story about that to tell you. About a book that was recommended to me that I definitely didn't read, and that was the famous Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by, what was his name? Robert M. Pirsig. 3 domiciles ago, three living quarters ago, I was living in a guest house in Tokyo, and there were some people that I didn't like very much. They all seemed to be congregated on the first floor, and up on the second floor, one of my best friends lived on one side of my room, and a new French guy lived on the other side, and I loved her, and we are still very close friends today. I won't name her, but she is a dear, dear friend of mine. And the French guy, let's call him Pierre. That's not his real name. And after this incident, sometime not connected to this incident, but after this incident, my dear friend on the one side and Pierre from France got together, and they were a couple for 2 or 3 years. That's not the story I'm here to tell you. But Pierre was really, I love him so much, and he is so pushy. I could give you countless examples, but there was one night the 3 of us were talking upstairs, and he said, "Sean, you like reading?" And I said, and this is when I was in a years-long reading slump, so I wasn't actually reading very much, but I was interested in reading theoretically. And he said, "I want to lend you this book." He showed me the art of, what is it? Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. It's about Buddhism and spirituality and stuff, and, I'm not knocking anybody's spiritual beliefs here, but you couldn't have paid me to read it, and he would not take no for an answer. He's just very pushy, but he has a gruff demeanor, but he's a big teddy bear, and that's all you need to know about him for this story to work, I hope. But he wouldn't take no, and I would say, "No, I don't want to read it. I'm not interested in philosophy at all, or Zen, Buddhist spirituality. No, I'd rather stick pins in my eyes." But he just wouldn't accept. So I finally took it out of his hand, and then he went into his room, and I left it on the banister, or the ledge there, right on the staircase. So it was sitting there in the morning, and he took it back, and we never spoke about it again, because, you can't boss me around. I'll read whatever I want, and Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance is not on that list. Number 5, a buddy read text. And so I'm not going to talk about any of my BookTube buddy readers, but I have lots of emotionally meaningful memories of dozens and dozens of buddy reads on BookTube. And before that on Litzy. But the one that I'm going to talk about is with my dear cousin, Lindsay. And I think this was while I was on Litzy but had not yet come on to BookTube. We decided to buddy read a book. A non-fiction book. Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. Now listen to the rest of the title. Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and Other Lessons from the Crematory by Caitlin Doughty. And she's a mortician, and this is her memoirs or whatever. Not just memoirs. It's her, it's kind of almost like an expose, but it's her anatomy of the funeral and mortuary industry in America. And it was a life-changing read, or death-changing read. So much stuff I didn't know about what happens when they embalm the body and how they prepare the body for a full casket, open casket burial, and oh, Jesus, I will never allow myself to be tortured that way after death. But anyway, it was a fascinating book. We didn't actually love it by the end. There were some flaws in it, but it was fascinating. And we would, I think, do a chapter a week, or maybe 2 chapters a week, and we'd meet once a week. And this was back in the day before I was an old man. I was only approaching old age. where I could walk for hours. And so we'd meet after the end of our working day. I think it was on a Tuesday or a Wednesday night. We'd meet at the station where I was finished work, and we'd just buy alcoholic beverages from the convenience stores, the 7-Elevens or whatever, and talk about our impressions of this book. And I would get more and more pissed. Lindsay is not, well, anyway, Lindsay's not as big a drinker as I am, but we had, alcohol-infused conversations about this book, and it is one of my most precious memories of my relationship with my cousin Lindsay, who, if you hadn't figured out by now, also lives in Tokyo, and she's been on this channel many times. Number 6, books introduced in school. Again, there's many books I could talk about, but here's one that I actually have a new copy, that I got another copy of this book for the purposes of rereading it, and guess what? I haven't reread it yet, but that is Peter Abraham's memoir, Tell Freedom. He was a black South African. He went into exile in about 1950, I think, or even earlier. And he went into exile in Jamaica from South Africa. This is his memoir of why he left. All the apartheid, racist, just horrific stuff that was going on in South Africa for most of the 20th century. And he went into exile in Jamaica, and he died there at the age of 97 about 4 years ago. It was after I started my channel. He was murdered. Somebody broke into his house and murdered him. He was 97. This was one of my textbooks for English class, grade 11 or something, grade 10. And it's the first anything that I read about South Africa, and it sparked a lifelong interest in South Africa, South African literature, South African politics, apartheid, and all that. So it's got a special place in my reading life, and I bought this copy so that I might reread it again. I haven't gotten around to it. Number 7, genre fiction that inspires nostalgia. So, I am famous or infamous on BookTube for poo-pooing genre fiction. I'm not interested in it. I am snobbish about it, and I make no apologies about any of that. But it wasn't always the case. And the last time that I tried a horror novel, I have a precious memory about that's just funny. I didn't end up liking this book very much, but there were things about it that I really liked. It came out about 5 or 6 years ago. Hex by Thomas Olde Hoevelt. Translated from, I believe, the Dutch by Nancy Forrest Flyer. And it was about a witch. The translation transposed the setting from Holland to America, which I think it was a big mistake, but anyway. So it's in this, I think, New England small city, and this city or large town or small city is haunted by a witch. So much so that the city, the municipal government has created an app that every citizen of the town can report a sighting of the witch, because she just kind of pops up, and she's kind of like, she's there. It's kind of like a hologram thing, but she can cause mayhem, and she can be violent. I can't remember all the details, but for an adult who doesn't really like horror or anything like that, to make a witch that's scary is quite a feat, and I was freaked out by this witch, because she would just kind of pop up, and so I think the second chapter in the novel, suddenly one of the main characters is this family with teenage kids and middle-aged parents, and suddenly the witch, just like Spock or whatever from Star Trek, just suddenly she's there in the living room, and so they're madly reporting it to the app, and they being very careful about what to do, and they know what they should do and what they shouldn't do, and there's something herky-jerky about her movements that, reading about the way she kind of moved through the world, it was freaking me out. And my husband, Kenji, is not a reader. He is deeply uninterested. I don't know if I've ever met anybody as uninterested in books and reading as Kenji, but he grew up loving horror movies, and so I shared the kind of the plot with him, and then he's a really good mimic, and he has a real sense of kind of comic timing, and so for weeks and weeks after, he would, he saw me do he saw me do my impression of how the witch kind of moved around, and then, you know, every time it came up in conversation or any time at all, he would just start doing it and crack me up, and I treasure that memory. The book actually sucked by the end. The writing wasn't very good. He's a good storyteller, but I hated the writing and I hated the ending, and, you know, I'm done with horror fiction, oh my god. But the premise was fantastic, and it scared the bejesus out of me. Number 8, now we're on familiar territory. Literary work that inspires nostalgia. So I have 2 for these, and this first one I will share briefly because I've talked about it umpteen times, and probably even quite recently, and that is, this is my favorite novel of all time, Do Not Say We Have Nothing by Madeleine Tien, and it won the Governor General's Award and was nominated for a whole bunch of other awards when it came out in 2016. And Madeleine Tien came to Tokyo and did a lecture at the Canadian Embassy. And I attended it and got my books autographed and got a picture taken with her, and she signed my book. She wrote, "For Sean, to the stories that find us, to all our homes and imagined selves, wishing you joy." She's a lovely person. The story I haven't told for quite some time is about the Canadian short story writer extraordinaire, Mavis Gallant. And I have one book. I brought one book back to Tokyo of books that I got signed by her in did she date it? No, but I think it might have been about 1995 when I was living in Toronto. Mavis Gallant was a journalist in Montreal, and she quit her job, got a divorce, and moved to Paris in about 1950. Never having written any fiction before then, and started writing short stories and sending them to the New Yorker. And I don't think it's much of an exaggeration to say that they published everything she wrote for 50 years. And to me, she is on par with Alison Munro as the 2 very best short story practitioners in modern times. She's not as well known as Alison Munro because she was a expatriate Canadian living in Paris, writing in English, with all of her stories, virtually all of them, published in the New Yorker. And thematically, she was obsessed with expatriates, exile people, French people living in Germany, German people living in, you know, wherever. And that theme is not everybody's cup of tea. I think she is a hidden treasure. And I went to a reading that she gave at the Harbourfront Festival of Authors in 1995. I went with my roommate at the time, and she did a reading of a story, and we were first in line for autographs, and we were so early, I don't know how we did that. We were so early that there was no point in lining up where the signing table was, but we found the door was open, and we stood outside, and we were smoking. And the Festival of Authors official brought Mavis Gallant, and at that time she was maybe 70, to the signing table, and it's just the wall to the outside is just all glass, and she looked at us, and she gave me the most knowing, mischievous grin, locked eyes with me like, I didn't know whether she wanted to have a cigarette. I don't know if she was a smoker, but she just looked at it saying, "I know what you guys are doing. You guys are being naughty." And I will never forget it. I had this moment with Mavis. But I had another moment with Mavis, which almost kind of ruined everything, but I treasure it just as much. So we got back in line, and I think we were maybe second and third in line to get our book signed. And I had a stack this big. And I have taken stacks that big to other readings and gotten in trouble. The festival staff kind of scolded me. That happened with Alice Munro, and I had to pick out less than half of the ones I brought to get her to sign. But there was nobody running interference for Mavis Gallant, and she was quite happy to sign every book, and she wrote in each one, "To Sean Mooney, Mavis Gallant." And we were chatting amiably, and she was just lovely. She's just a lovely person. Does not suffer fools gladly, because she said after about the 5th book, she said, "I think I'm going to dream about your name tonight." So I said, how old was I in 1995? 29. stupid country hick boy in the big city, and I said to my favorite writer in the world, "Oh, well, maybe you can use one of your stories." And she looked at me and she said, "I don't need any advice about that, thank you very much." She didn't like my little quip. So I said, "Oh, I'm sorry." But she finished signing my books. And nostalgic. It's nostalgia, boys and girls. Number 9. Spiritual text that inspires nostalgia. Well, I am in present day not a very spiritual person, but when I was a child, I read a religious memoir that deeply affected me, and which still, when I think of it, I have a nostalgic feeling for, and that is the Holocaust memoir by the evangelical Christian writer from Holland, Corrie ten Boom, called The Hiding Place. And it is the story of her and her Christian Dutch family that hid Jews in the attic of their house, or in the secret rooms of their house, kind of like Anne Frank, and obviously at the same time. And they got caught, and they all went to Auschwitz, or I can't remember which concentration camp. My memory is that it was Auschwitz. And the elderly father died there, and she and her sister, I can almost remember her sister's name, were imprisoned in the concentration camp, along with, thousands of Jews and gay people and gypsies and whatever. And because these Christian Hollanders had tried to save Jews, they were put there. And it's her memoir of what that was like. She survived, her sister did not. And it's an incredible memoir. I don't know if I would be able to hack the evangelical Christianity of what she wrote, but I certainly loved the book when I was a teenager. Corrie ten Boom, The Hiding Place. And then the last one, number 10, is to tag some people. So I have to say that YouTube sucks, because their search function used to be fantastic, and now it just doesn't work. So if I search for the name of this tag, I get a list of some people that have done it, but it's not thorough. So I've actually taken the time to search for the channel name of the people I wanted to tag, plus the tag name, and I think these people that I'm about to tag have not done it. I've also chosen a bunch of new booktubers that didn't exist on BookTube when this tag was made, so I think I'm safe. So if you haven't already done this, I'm tagging you, and also, if I don't tag you here, and you want to do the tag, I am tagging you, alright? I am tagging Brian of Bookish, Larry of Larry Has Opinions, Aaron Fraser, Karen of Runwright Reads, Heidi of My Reading Life, Marc Nash, Kim of Middle of the Book March, Lexa of Lexa Reads, AJ Dunn Reads and Writes, Fraser Simons of Springboard Thought, and Cousin of Always Doing, and you. Thanks for watching.